That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
Okay, I got to keep this intro brief because here we are going to be going 2 rounds deep with this Dynasty rookie mock draft, and I wanted to get some more people involved. Y'all know 9 out of 10 of these we're going to be doing just primarily for the people a part of the flock over there on Patreon. We have probably the largest and I want to say the best Dynasty fantasy football community there is, and that's over there on Patreon, where we're going to be getting a ton of these mock drafts going. Also, you know, we have our Dynasty rankings there. We have our Dynasty rookie rankings there that are going to be consistently updated all the way until the NFL draft and probably a little bit further than that. And also on Patreon, you can get in our Dynasty group chat, get in a Dynasty league with us. Ton of stuff you can do, but you already know that. The links can be down there in the description of the video. Now, in this, I didn't want to just involve them, so I kind of went to the streets of Twitter. I said, hey, let's get that rookie mock draft going. Please just leave a comment with your next rookie pick. And we got 24 players to go over, and should be exciting. Let's keep this intro brief. Subscribe, like, leave a comment, let me know why I'm stupid, and let's dive into this. And let's start it off with my own pick. We're not going to talk about him too much because everybody knows Treylon Burks. With Treylon Burks, in my opinion, even in a superflex format, he should be the #1 player off the board as of now. If you're looking at his market share numbers at Arkansas, really, there are no questions, not to mention once we get to the NFL Combine, even though we've talked about this for years now, that athleticism and size at the wide receiver position does not really matter if you're looking at historical trends, and what matters is collegiate production with context, translating that to the next level. But nonetheless, we know that when you come in and you show that you are a size adjusted freak in terms of your athletic profile at the NFL Combine, more people are just going to get excited. So I can guarantee you that Treylon Burks is going to be a player that people have not seen the peak hype for. This is going to be an option that once we get to April, he'll be more valuable in Dynasty than he currently is. I will say, as a quick side note, I think this is the cheapest I have ever seen rookie picks. Now, of course, a lot of people at this time think that this is a very bad rookie class, and I've talked about this in depth. And while, yes, this may not be the best rookie class you are ever going to see, while, yes, this may be a below average rookie class, I promise you these picks are of value at this point. When you're getting the rookie pick 101 in the 4th round of a startup draft, when you're able to trade Mike Evans for the 102, you have to be taking those deals. I mean, just from a value perspective alone, if you look at the timeline of Dynasty value and how the entire Dynasty community, whether it's a YouTube channel, a podcast, whether it's your league chat, whether it's just a regular Dynasty fantasy football chat, everybody and their mom is going to be talking about these rookies until May. I promise you, they're going to continue to rise in value. Now, I've only been playing Dynasty since 2014, but we have seen it every single year. I mean, you have the seasons where Laquan Treadwell, Josh Dotson, Corey Coleman all get pushed up the draft board, despite probably not deserving so. So I promise you, there will be rookie hype baked in. Do not sell your rookie picks right now. If you want to sell them when we get to April, when they're worth more, I'm fine with it. But let's hold on to him now. Treylon Burks is a perfect example of a player that I think will be going up in Dynasty value by the time we get to May. And now going over to our rookie pick 102, this is actually an option that is supposedly going higher in the real life NFL draft than he's going in Dynasty drafts. It's going to be Garrett Wilson, who is pretty much consensus wide receiver 1 off the board if you're looking at NFL mock drafters at this point. Now, the reason I, as well as some other people who participated in this mock draft, are going to have Garrett Wilson behind Treylon Burks because that's what the majority of the Dynasty community has at this point. I want to say it's based on the fact that Garrett Wilson has never been the wide receiver 1 on his own offense. Now, keep in mind, Justin Jefferson wasn't the wide receiver 1 on his own offense, so it's not like this is something you have to be, because, of course, he played with Chris Olave, who's also going to be a first-round pick in this year's draft class. And also he played with Jackson Smith. Can't pronounce the last name, but he is going to be the wide receiver 1 overall in the 2023 draft class. And he may look like a Jamar Chase level prospect. maybe even a little bit better, to be honest. He looks like probably one of the best wide receiver prospects I've ever seen since Amari Cooper. But of course, we'll get to him in next year's class. I think Garrett Wilson at the 102 is a completely fine pick if you're looking at the context of his production. Now at the 103, Breece Hall ended up going off the board. And here I've seen some people make the argument that Breece Hall or Isaiah Spiller should be the 101. I'm completely fine with that argument because if you look historically, running backs as rookies are some of the best investments that you can make, knowing the opportunity that the majority of them at the position see year one if they get the adequate draft capital. And the second that they see that opportunity on the field and do anything with it, you see their dynasty value skyrocket. Now, I am going to be hesitant at this point of the offseason to be taking Breece Hall over Drake London because while Breece Hall does profile to be a 3-down running back and he looks like he can be a workhorse player and get touches in the red zone as well as in the receiving game, I am uncertain of the level of draft capital that he will have. If he ends up being a top 50 to 60 pick in the NFL draft, I will be completely fine taking him in this range, knowing that he does have the potential to go out there and be that 3-down running back. But at this time, it looks like there's a chance that he falls outside of the top 2 rounds, that he falls into a range where maybe in the middle of the 3rd. Keep in mind, guys like Alexander Madison, I mean, players go in the 3rd round all the time that don't necessarily find their way to being starting running backs, but just because a team thinks they're a great value. So there is an outside chance that Breece Hall finds himself in a landing spot that may not lead to opportunity his rookie season. So I would rather wait and see the draft capital before I'm willing to put Breece Hall ahead of our next player that actually goes at the 104 in Drake London. Now, if you run over to Patreon real quick and you pull up our Dynasty rookie rankings, of course, all our rankings, whether it's our Dynasty startup or our Dynasty rookie rankings, they're going to be broken down into tiers as well, because I think if anything that maybe helps y'all out more than just the overall rankings. And I have Drake London in that top tier alongside Treylon Burks and Garrett Wilson. If you look at the age-adjusted production and you look at the context of that production as well, there are very few players that are as exciting as Drake London, as this is a wide receiver that outproduced Amon-Ra St. Brown at a younger age. Not only did he outproduce Amon-Ra St. Brown in that same offense at a younger age, but at 17 years old in an offense that had Michael Pittman and St. Brown, Drake London was able to go out there and make himself an every down player that drew targets at a consistent clip and broke out at 17 years old. He is one of the best wide receiver prospects we are going to see. Now, like I've said before, size doesn't really matter too much at the wide receiver position. It doesn't. What matters is age-adjusted production in college and production overall within the context of their collegiate offense. Drake London is elite in both categories. He should be a top 15 pick in the NFL draft. Right now, he's being mocked, if you're looking at grinding the mocks, at pick 21. But I wouldn't be surprised if he goes up. It's really going to come down to what we see with the injury. And now going over to our next player will be Isaiah Spiller at the 105. Very similar to a player like Breece Hall. I don't necessarily think either running back stands out too much at this point. I think I would probably look to take Isaiah Spiller above Breece Hall just based off of the receiving down capabilities. But still, I think I would rather prefer waiting a little bit to value these running backs in a range like this until we actually see their landing spots and their NFL draft capital, because we know the running back position is most dictated by landing spot and NFL draft capital compared to anything else that we are going to see. And it's going to be the hardest predict at this point of the offseason in early February. So I think I would rather take those bona fide stud wide receivers. And I would also rather take our next player that goes in this mock draft in Matt Corral at the 106. Now, if you're looking at Matt Corral and you're looking at where current NFL mock drafters are having him, Matt Corral is supposedly going to be the second quarterback off the board at around pick 16. Now, if you look historically at what this NFL draft capital means for Matt Corral, it would mean that he does get an opportunity to start either his rookie or his sophomore year season. Now, it's not the same as being a Zach Wilson or a Trey Lance, whereas if you get that top 3 NFL draft capital, it doesn't matter if you go out there and just completely bust. You can go and you can be Mitchell Trubisky. You can go and you can be Blake Bortles. You can be a horrible starting quarterback through the first 3 to 4 years of your NFL career, yet you're still going to be guaranteed that starting job based on the level of team investment that the organization has into you. Now, with Matt Corral, if he goes in pick 16, it's going to be a little bit more in line of what you see historically with Josh Rosen and Dwayne Haskins, whereas if he flames out year 1, there is an outside chance that this is a quarterback that could get replaced going into year 2. However, I still think the Matt Corral investment is in fantastic here at the 106, because if he was a hit his rookie season, very few players could see the exponential growth in value that Matt Corral could have from a mid first round selection to being worth multiple first his second year. So I think with Corral, yes, he should be valued a lot lower than what we saw with players last offseason like Trevor Lawrence, Trey Lance, and Zach Wilson. However, at the 106, if you're looking at some of the other players on the board right now, I think Matt Corral, definitely a great pick. Now, the next pick at the 107, I honestly can't get behind. It's going to be Carson Strong. And now y'all know I have always been a person to say, hell, the Dynasty community, regardless who you're watching, horrible at quarterback evaluation for people to go out there and be arrogant enough to think that they can look at a quarterback on film and tell you who they think is going to succeed at the NFL level, when NFL organizations can't do that accurately when they're investing millions and millions and millions of dollars into those decisions. I think that's ludicrous. So what we've always talked about is evaluating the situation the quarterback's stepping into. If Lawrence is stepping into a horrible situation in Jacksonville and Trey Lance is stepping into a great situation in San Francisco, take that into account. If Zach Wilson, Justin Fields are going to teams where we're not expecting them to be able to easily succeed, take that into account. Knock them down. Also, what do we need to be evaluating? The draft capital, the team investment into those quarterbacks, and what that will mean historically with the amount of years that they have as starters. Now, throw on the fact that, of course, at the end of the day, you need fantasy production. You need points per game. And a big portion of that comes from the rushing ability of those quarterbacks. And right now, Carson Strong, who goes to the 107 here, doesn't really look like he has any of those things. If we're looking at NFL mock drafts right now, looks like he's going to be a early second round pick to mid second round pick. And in that range, probably not going to be an NFL starter. And to go along with this, even if he does become an NFL starter, he's going to have an extremely short leash. To go along with that, he will not have any rushing upside whatsoever. So even if he is a starter, it's not like a Jalen Hurts scenario where Jalen Hurts went in the second round of the Philadelphia Eagles in 2020. I love Jalen Hurts because we said, hell, if Jalen Hurts starts for the Eagles, he starts with your fantasy team because you know that rushing upside. Carson Strong isn't that guy. So seeing him go at the 107 here, I can't get behind it. I think that is way too early. Now our next running back will be Kenneth Walker at the 108. And here with Kenneth Walker, I understand the sentiment. This should be the #1 running back in the NFL draft off the board. Now, personally, even though draft capital matters so much at the running back position, I am not ranking him at running back 1 because of the lack of receiving game capability that both Breece Hall and Isaiah Spiller have over him. And they should all be in a similar range of the NFL draft. So I'm thinking that Kenneth Walker's a running back that I probably won't walk away with a ton this offseason. There's actually one more player I'd prefer on this board over him. He ends up going at the 109, and that's going to be Kenny Pickett. Now, with Kenny Pickett, he should be the first quarterback off the board in the real life NFL draft. And I'm fine if you want to have Matt Corral ahead of Kenny Pickett if you believe that Matt Corral has more rushing upside, because right now, if you're looking at it, I mean, you have Kenny Pickett projected to go at around pick 12, Matt Corral projected to go around pick 15, 16. So there's not a big difference if you're looking at that level of team investment. And with Matt Corral, I mean, if he does have more rushing upside, sure, take him ahead in fantasy. Like if you're going over to Patreon real quick and you're looking at where I personally have a couple of these guys, I have Matt Corral as our quarterback 1 at pick 4 overall, and I have Kenny Pickett as our quarterback 2 at pick 5 overall. Regardless, I think both quarterbacks were fantastic values in this mock draft. And going over to pick 10, another pick I don't like is going to be Jameson Williams. And with Williams, obviously you have the significant injury at the end of the season here. It's completely different, just given the fact that if you're looking at a J.K. Dobbins level player, something we always talk about, where you have the injury before the year, you're going to have that entire season to be able to go through rehab and be ready for the following year. Well, Williams, not going to have that opportunity. Going to miss out on the NFL Combine, which probably will temper expectations slightly and kind of slow down the hype, whether it should or not. To go along with this, we'll miss rookie minicamp. Add on the fact that he's not going to be at training camp. Then he's probably not going to be able to participate in NFL preseason. He's going to be added back onto that team, probably going to be able to start practicing week 3, week 4 of his rookie season. I can't get behind taking Williams here, especially if you're looking at the fact that Chris Olave outproduced him drastically in the same offense at the same age. I can't see taking Jameson Williams over a wide receiver that outproduced him in the same offense, especially if that other wide receiver is going to go before him in the NFL draft and is 100% healthy at this point. Now, our next guy going to be Malik Willis at the 111. Malik Willis has a ton of rushing upside. Love taking him here. I mean, I actually have him at pick 11 in my own Dynasty rankings. And if we're looking at this, I think I have David Bell too high. We're going to be moving down David Bell in these rankings here. But nonetheless, we'll talk about him in 1 second. Yeah, Malik Willis is going to be a quarterback that you don't know if it's going to get the chance to start year 1. Should go late round 1 in the NFL draft, early round 2. If you're looking at grinding the mocks right now, which essentially just composites all mock drafts into an ADP list, he's actually projected to go a little bit higher here than if you're looking at mock draft database. Regardless, they're expecting him to be a late round 1 pick. If this is a quarterback that starts in real life, you're probably going to go through and start him in fantasy, because to pull up what Malik Willis did, I believe he took a step back his final season at Liberty. But the year before, the rushing production was pretty damn nice. Yeah, you're looking at this junior season, and in 10 games, he had 944 rushing yards. And if you account for the fact that in college, sacks count as negative rushing yards, Malik Willis essentially averaging 100 rushing yards a game his junior year, that's something you can get excited about. I would definitely prefer Malik Willis over a lot of these other options. Now, David Bell, going to be our player at the 112. And with David Bell, as we've said, we just moved him down our own rankings over there on Patreon, because every time I look at him, I understand, yes, a lot of people want to get excited about just the overall metrics that he has. I mean, if you're looking at David Bell, breakout age there. Not only is the breakout age there, he was dominant his final season at Purdue. But if I'm comparing him to other wide receivers, I mean, I think that this is the perfect parallel that I can ever make, because, I mean, they're going to be going in a similar range. But if you're looking at David Bell and Chris Olave from an NFL perspective, Olave is supposed to go significantly before him. If you're looking at Chris Olave as well, of course, I have Garrett Wilson ranked way over him. But looking back at 2020, these were wide receivers in the same offense and the same exact age. They were born within a month of each other. Chris Olave outproduced them. Now, I understand that he took a step back his final season, but with David Bell in comparison, I mean, outside of Rondale Moore, and keep in mind, Rondale Moore really was never healthy at Purdue outside of his rookie season. David Bell didn't really have that target competition at Purdue. I really don't think we can get behind taking David Bell much higher than this. At the 112, I'm completely fine with it. I'm more so talking about why I'm going to have him ranked at the 112. And I know I seem like I'm talking down on him, but at this price point, completely fine. It's more so compared to where most other people are going to have him closer to the 108, the 107. And that's what I can't get behind. And now our next player off the board is going to be Sam Howell at the 201. With Sam Howell should also be going in that similar range of Malik Willis in the NFL draft. Hopefully he finds himself in a situation like Pittsburgh where he can succeed. As we've discussed before, I am not arrogant enough to sit here and think that we can evaluate quarterbacks in terms of just knowing what guys are going to be successful no matter what when they hit the NFL. So many people in Dynasty think they can do that every offseason. So many people miss out on Josh Allen, miss out on Justin Herbert. They go and chase instead Dwayne Haskins. They go and chase, Justin Fields. While we sit here, let the NFL tell us what they know about quarterbacks that we don't. And at the same time, we evaluate the situations they're stepping into. So with Sam Howell, as of now, completely fine price point, has some rushing upside to go along with this. He is looking like he could start year 1 Now, Desmond Ritter is going to be our next guy at the 202. Let's just copy and paste this. If you're looking at right now where Desmond Ritter should be going in the NFL draft, he's supposed to be going in a similar range of Carson Strong. That's why I think if you can get Desmond Ritter in the early second compared to Carson Strong in the middle of the first, I'm definitely taking Desmond Ritter at the beginning of the second every time. And then our 203 is going to be Chris Olave, someone we've talked about. I mean, a ton in this video. And the reason for that is every single offseason, the Dynasty community goes out there and picks one player and they go, hey, this guy's going too early in the NFL draft. We are going to fade him in Dynasty because think about it. Everybody has to have their one player that they say is going to bust, or they just sound like they like every option. So everybody usually picks the same guy. They all say, okay, player X, he's going to fail. He's going to fail. He's going to fail. He's going to fail. Because what happens when he succeeds, like Josh Allen, everybody can say, oh, we didn't see that coming. How would you have known that? No, Chris Olave, I think that he actually has a much more impressive profile than people are giving him credit for. He should be going literally neck and neck in the NFL draft compared to someone like Treylon Burks. Don't be surprised that Chris Olave is the second wide receiver off the board. This is an option that, like we said, at the same exact age as Garrett Wilson in 2020, he led Ohio State in both targets and receiving yards on a per game basis. He crushed a wide receiver like Jamal Williams at that same age in that same offense that's going significantly ahead of him in this Dynasty rookie mock draft, despite Chris Olave also going ahead of him in the NFL draft. I can't get behind a couple of those picks where Chris Olave is going this far down. I would take Chris Olave ahead of both David Bell as well as Jamal Williams. And now our next player is going to be Jahan Dotson. And here, I know a lot of people over there on Patreon have told me that we have disrespected him by ranking him as the 13th player overall. We have him in the same tier as Jamal Williams. I'm very low on Jamal Williams, but I honestly don't necessarily see what y'all do. I don't think he should be a first-round pick. I think the 204 is a perfect spot for him. This is a wide receiver that stayed all 4 years at Penn State, and more importantly, he's not a Chris Olave. He didn't break out whenever he was 19 years old at a top program. Now, yes, he was at a top program, but he didn't break out till his junior season. So if he had to break out his junior year and didn't have that full-blown ascension and he had to stay all 4 years in college, that's a little bit of a red flag here. Now, if you're looking at where he's going to go in the NFL draft, I know draft capital is not everything, especially at the wide receiver position. He should go in a nice range. He should be a late round 1, early round 2 selection. But still, if you're looking historically, you need to be seeing your wide receivers break out at a very early age like Drake London and dominate in their respective offenses by the time they get to their true sophomore/junior year. And you want to see them coming out after 3 years in college. So Dotson, I think the 204 is a perfectly fine price point. Now, the 205 is going to end up being Trey McBride, and this is a tight end premium mock draft. We did clarify that whenever we were discussing this over there on Twitter. And if you're looking at Trey McBride, he's nothing close to what we saw this past year with Kyle Pitts. Of course, Kyle Pitts kind of breaking everybody's mind, just given the fact that he was the best tight end prospect of all time. It wasn't even close. Now, Trey McBride almost has 100 receiving yards a game last year at at Colorado, not Ohio State. Now, this is incredibly impressive in that he dominated this offense. Almost 100 receiving yards per game. The next best receiving option, who was not a tight end, was a wide receiver, had 500 receiving yards at Colorado last year. So Trey McBride was dominant. Now, he is not Kyle Pitts. He is not even Pat Freiermuth. I mean, at this point, if you could trade Trey McBride and get Freiermuth, of course you're making that deal. I'd probably prefer Cole Kmet as well, but that's just because these rookie tight ends don't produce right away, and you're going to have to hold this player, and he's not going to increase in value for the next 2 to 3 seasons. But if you're fine doing so, I mean, he was hyper productive in college, and he should be a second-round pick as well in the NFL draft. And now going over to our next player, someone that I'm pretty damn high on. I mean, if you're looking at where we have him over there on Patreon, George Pickens, we have him as our 15th option overall. So we would have him at the 203. He falls to the 206 in this mock draft. And with George Pickens, I mean, if you're looking at where he's supposed to go in the NFL draft, he's a wide receiver that's looking like he's going to be an early second round pick. Now, of course, he has that Georgia attachment to him. So a lot of people know the name. A lot of people want to inherently say that he's maybe a little bit overrated based on the program, kind of like what I want to say with a wide receiver in Jamal Williams coming out of Alabama. Now, the issue is this is someone that simply has not been able to stay healthy. We really don't have a clean profile that we can look at based on the competition that he saw early in his career at Georgia, and you're not expecting a true freshman that's going to be going there at 18 years old to be able to come out and be dominant. Now, I will say his freshman season, he was able to break out. I mean, let me do some quick math here. I know that it's a little bit of a different story just because obviously this Georgia offense is never really prolific in terms of their passing yards per game. So if you're looking at his true freshman season, this offense had 223 passing yards per game. And if you're looking at the receiving yards here, George Pickens led this team with receiving yards at 727. Now, of course, we have to convert this to a per game standpoint to get these market share numbers, but let's figure this out really quick because it is incredibly impressive that he was able to do this at 18 years old in a fantastic offense, of course. At 18 years old, he had 27% of the receiving yards on a per game basis for Georgia. What else can you ask for? I mean, I know that he wasn't able to stay healthy, but if he gets the draft capital, I believe this is a player that has the talent where he can go out there and he can put up numbers as a rookie. And now going over to our next player in Kyren Williams. I actually like Williams at this price point as well. I mean, I think if we're comparing him to some of the other wide receivers in this range, Kyren Williams is probably going to be the guy I'm taking. I actually have him ranked as the 16th player off the board. So I have him ranked at the 204 and he falls here to the 207. I don't think there's too much to talk about. Let's move on to the 208. We're going to have to speed this up a little bit. Where we got John Mechie. I don't like it. I don't really see it. I mean, if we're going to go over and look at where he is going in the NFL draft, at least supposedly going, he's going to be a 3rd round pick. Of course, he has the big school attached to him. Now, if you're going to be looking at the stats, a little bit skewed because, of course, Alabama over the past 3 to 4 years, every year pretty much besides this last one, had, I want to say, the best receiving core in college football. I mean, you had Devonta Smith, you had Jalen Waddle. Years before that, you had Jerry Jeudy, you had Henry Ruggs. You had guys that were going to dominate targets no matter what. But this past season, playing alongside Jameson Williams, I mean, you actually had this wide receiver averaging less than 100 receiving yards a game. Jameson Williams, a player that we've already discussed that I'm pretty low on. I mean, he does drastically outproduce John Mechie, so I'm personally going to be avoiding him unless we can get him a little bit lower than this. Now, Wandel Robinson is going to be our next wide receiver at the 209. I actually prefer him over John Mechie. I mean, this is a wide receiver coming out of Kentucky, obviously doesn't have the big name program. He should be going in the late 2nd round, and this is a dynamic wide receiver at the same time that I could see upside for producing year one. I definitely prefer him over what we've seen previously. And our next player at the 210 is going to be Sky Moore. Now, with Sky Moore, there are a couple other names that I personally would prefer. I mean, if we're looking at where he's supposedly going in the NFL draft, and of course, this is not a perfect measure. This is looking at current mock drafts, but this is a player that's not even supposed to be in the top 3 rounds. I mean, I don't necessarily even know what we're looking for at this point. I mean, if you're going to be pulling up the stats, you're seeing him as a wide receiver that took until his junior year at Western Michigan to produce. If you're playing at Western Michigan, you need to be, I hate to bring this up because obviously he went to that same school. You need to be Corey Davis if you're going to be a wide receiver on the radar. If you're going to be playing in the MAC conference, you need to be Corey Davis. You need to be Cooper Kupp with your collegiate production to generate excitement at the next level. I mean, let's go and pull up Corey Davis's collegiate stacks compared to Sky Moore, where Corey Davis comes out here and his freshman season, he averages almost 100 receiving yards a game. He has 1,400 receiving yards his sophomore year. 1,400 receiving yards his sophomore year, and it takes, I mean, Sky Moore until his junior year to peak out at 1,200. I can't get behind it at the 210. I just think that really, if you're playing in a conference like this, you have to be dominant. And this just looks like, I mean, a good wide receiver with SEC production, but this isn't SEC production. I mean, just for funsies, let's look up Cooper Kupp's collegiate stacks. And of course, Cooper Kupp, a little bit of an outlier, maybe the best wide receiver in the NFL, but nonetheless, Cooper Kupp went to such a small school, you can't even pull it up on a traditional website. Instead, you have to pull it up, and his true freshman year, he went out there and had 1,600 receiving yards. That's what we're talking about for these wide receivers that are in small schools. Now, our next player is going to be James Cook, another player that I'm not too excited about because of the running back position. I mean, a lot gets dictated by your NFL draft capital. And if you're going to be able to go out there and get opportunity in year one, I think that he probably ends up being in a handcuff type situation, but I'm fine with it if you want to draft someone like Chuba Hubbard at the end of the second. And our last player, my guy out of this list, we have him higher on Patreon than he goes in this mock draft, going to be Justin Ross. Now, I was looking into this right before we made this video, and it is pretty damn funny to pull up. But if we look at that 2019 Clemson offense, now, of course, you can look at, more recent seasons for Justin Ross, but no, this is the year that I want to look at. This is when Justin Ross is 18 years old and he's playing alongside, who we now know is a great NFL wide receiver in T. Higgins. You have Justin Ross going out there and having 865 receiving yards. This is compared to T. Higgins with more games played at 1,100. Let me convert this over to receiving yards on a per game basis so we get a better idea of what we have here. You actually have T. Higgins with 77 receiving yards per game, whereas, the 18-year-old Justin Ross at a younger age goes out there and gets 61. So Justin Ross was in a similar range to T. Higgins as a younger player. He outproduces Amari Rodgers, who went in the third round this past year to the Green Bay Packers. He outproduced Travis Etienne, obviously Etienne in a different position. Nonetheless, Ross was a dominant player his freshman year at Clemson. It's all about the neck injury. If that neck injury is something we no longer have to worry about going forward, he could be an elite level prospect. There's a lot of risk, but if you're talking about late second round picks and trying to find ceiling, Justin Ross is the guy you're going for. Now, of course, thank you so much for supporting the channel and being a part of the flock. Really hope that y'all enjoyed this mock draft. Go down there, drop a like, leave a comment letting me know why I am so stupid. Subscribe to the channel as well if you have not already. And of course, you can join our awesome community of Dynasty Fantasy Football players over there on Patreon. The links can be found in the description of this video. I think that should be it. Hope you have a great day and hope we get to catch you out with the video tomorrow.